The night Mara landed in Belford, the air felt heavier than she remembered. It wasn't just because of the heat. It wasn't the noise either, the loud voices, the engines, the movement of people everywhere. Belford had always been alive, always restless, always full of energy. But tonight, something else made her chest feel tight. Excitement. The kind of excitement that made her fingers shake a little as she switched on her phone and the screen came alive. 10 missed calls, all from her husband, Adrian. Mara smiled to herself. He had no idea she was back. For 3 long years, she had lived abroad, working as a nurse. She had worked double shifts, overnight shifts, and long weekends that left her body weak and her eyes heavy. She saved every pound she could, every note, every coin. She denied herself comfort. She missed holidays. She missed family events. She missed home. And through all of it, she kept telling herself the same thing. It will all be worth it when I return home to my husband. She had told Adrian she needed 1 more year before coming back. But that was not true. She wanted to surprise him. She had imagined this moment many times. She imagined him opening the door and freezing in shock. She imagined his face breaking into tears. She imagined him pulling her into his arms and saying, "You came back. You really came back." That was the moment she had been carrying in her heart for years. She thought it was waiting for her. She had no idea something else was. The driver she hired from the distant airport kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Madam," he said carefully, "are you sure you don't want me to call him before we get there?" He knew them from before she travelled. He had seen them together in better days. Mara smiled and shook her head. "No, I want it to be a surprise." The driver nodded, but his expression stayed uncertain. Mara didn't think much of it. She turned her gaze to the window and watched the streets of Belford move past. The roadside kiosks, the yellow streetlights, the smell of roasted corn in the night air, the faint mix of rain, dust and fuel. She had missed this city. She lifted her hand and touched the small gold bracelet on her wrist. Adrian had given it to her on the day she left Belford. At the airport, he had held her face gently and told her to go and build their future. "I'll hold things down here," he had promised, and she had believed him completely. When the car finally turned into her street, Mara sat up straighter. Her heart began to beat faster. Then she saw it, the house. The cream-coloured duplex she had paid for with years of sacrifice stood proudly behind the gate. It looked beautiful at night, but almost immediately something felt strange. The balcony light was new. The curtains were different. The flowers in the small front garden were pink. Mara frowned slightly. She had planted white lilies before leaving. White lilies were her favourite. Maybe Adrian had changed things to surprise her too. The thought made her smile again. The driver honked. A young security guard she had never seen before came out to open the gate. Mara stepped out of the car with her suitcase. "I live here," she said. "Call Adrian." The guard looked confused. He studied her face like she was a stranger. "Madam, Olga no day around," he said. "He travelled out of Belford yesterday." Her excitement dropped a little, but she forced herself to stay calm. "It's fine," she said. "I have my keys." She rolled her suitcase toward the door. With every step, A strange uneasiness began to grow inside her. She reached the entrance and inserted the key. It didn't turn. She frowned and tried again. Still nothing. Her stomach tightened. She knocked on the door. Few seconds later, she heard footsteps approaching. Not the heavy footsteps of a man. These were lighter, a woman's steps. Mara's hand slowly dropped from the door. Then the door opened, and her whole world stopped. Standing there was Celine, her best friend, the same Celine she had laughed with, prayed with, trusted for years. Celine was wearing Mara's robe. She had Mara's favourite headscarf wrapped around her hair, and she was standing inside Mara's house looking stunned, like she had just seen a ghost. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Mara's voice finally came out, but it was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing in my house?" Selene blinked quickly. "Mara." Her voice shook. Mara looked past her into the living room. Everything looked wrong. The furniture had been changed. The arrangement was different. The room no longer carried her touch. "This is not what it looks like," Celine said in a rush. Mara let out a dry laugh. "Then tell me," she said slowly, "what exactly does it look like?" Celine stepped halfway outside and pulled the door behind her as though she didn't want Mara to see more. "Please, lower your voice." Mara stared at her. "Lower my voice?" she repeated. "You are standing in my house, wearing my clothes, and you want me to lower my voice?" The security guard looked away, pretending not to hear. "Let's go inside," Selene whispered, but Mara did not move. "Where is my husband?" Selene swallowed hard. "He's not here. That is not what I asked." The silence between them turned sharp, heavy, dangerous. Mara's eyes stayed on her friend's face. "Selene," she said quietly, "tell me why you have keys to my house." Selene looked away, and in that moment, Mara felt something break inside her. She pushed past Selene and entered the house. The first thing she noticed was the smell, a perfume she didn't own. On the centre table sat 2 wine glasses. One still had lipstick on the rim. Her suitcase slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. She barely noticed. She started walking upstairs. Her legs felt weak, but something inside her kept pushing her forward. "Mara, please," Selene called behind her. But Mara kept moving. She reached the master bedroom and pushed the door open. Then she froze. The room had changed too. The walls had been repainted. The bedsheets were sooned. Different. The colours were different. The feeling was different. Then her eyes landed on the dresser. Framed photographs. Not of her, of Adrian and Selene, smiling together, standing close. Too close. Mara's breathing became uneven. 3 years. 3 years of hard work. 3 years of sending money. 3 years of trusting her husband. 3 years of believing she was building a marriage. Behind her, Celine started crying. "It started small," she said weakly. "He was lonely. I was only trying to help." Mara turned slowly. "Help?" she repeated. "You were helping by sleeping in my bed?" Selene shook her head in panic. "No, it wasn't like that at first." "Then what was it like?" Selene covered her face and cried harder. "He told me you weren't coming back." Mara blinked. "What?" Selene's voice trembled. "He said you met someone abroad. He said you had changed. He said you were only sending money because you felt sorry for him." Mara stared at her in disbelief. I was working 12-hour shifts, she said. Celine cried openly now. He told me you stopped loving him. Mara's head felt light. Every phone call, every prayer, every time Adrian said he missed her, was all of it a lie? Then suddenly her phone rang. Both women looked down. Adrian called. Mara answered. "Hello!" His voice came through, tense and sharp. "Mara, where are you?" She looked around the bedroom. At home. There was silence on the line. Then Adrian spoke again. "You should have told me you were coming." Mara almost laughed. "I wanted to surprise you." Another pause. Then he said, very carefully, "We need to talk." Mara looked at Celine, standing there in tears, wearing her robe in the room she paid for. "Yes," Mara said softly, "we do." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began to fall against the windows. Inside the house, the air had changed. Nothing felt safe anymore. Nothing felt familiar. And yet Mara knew one thing for sure. She was not leaving. Not tonight. Not without the truth. Because what stood before her was no longer just betrayal. It felt deeper than that, darker than that, more planned than that. Celine wiped her tears and whispered, "He's on his way back." Mara walked slowly to the mirror and looked at herself. She looked like a woman who had returned home only to find out she no longer belonged in it. But by the time Adrian stepped into Deceit, that house, one thing would become clear to him. She was not the helpless wife he thought he could deceive forever. And whatever truth was still hidden beneath this betrayal, she was going to uncover it. The rain grew heavier. The calm night deepened. And inside that house, a storm was waiting to begin. This was only the start. The rain didn't stop. It fell hard against the windows, like it was trying to enter the house. Like it too wanted to witness what was about to happen inside. Mara stood in the bedroom, staring at her own reflection. She looked the same, but she didn't feel the same. Something inside her had shifted. Behind her, Celine sat quietly at the edge of the bed. Her crying had reduced to soft sniffles. Her hands were shaking as she twisted her fingers together again and again. The robe she was wearing suddenly didn't look comfortable on her anymore. It looked wrong, like something that didn't belong to her, like something stolen. The silence between them felt thick, heavy. Then Mara spoke. Her voice was calm, but cold. "How long?" Celine looked up slowly. "What?" Mara turned to face her fully. "How long have you been here?" Celine hesitated, and that hesitation alone was enough to hurt, but Mara needed to hear it. "I asked you a question," Celine swallowed. 2 years. The words dropped into the room like something breaking. Mara blinked slowly. 2 years. Celine nodded, tears building again. "So, 1 year after I left," Mara continued quietly, "you moved into my house?" Celine shook her head quickly. "It didn't happen like that. Please try to understand." Mara let out a small breath. "Help me understand." Celine. Celine wiped her face. "He said the house was too big for him to stay alone," she said. "He said there were security issues, that the area wasn't safe, that he needed someone around." Mara nodded slowly. "So you came to help with security?" Celine looked down. "And then, you helped yourself into the master bedroom too?" Celine broke down again. just happened gradually. Mara almost smiled. Gradually. As if betrayal was something that just happens by accident. As if people don't make choices. As if every step didn't matter. Mara turned away from her and walked toward the Cound. Window. Outside, the headlights of a car flashed through the rain. Both women froze. Celine stood up immediately. "He's here!" Mara didn't move. She simply stood there, breathing slowly, steady, controlled. Footsteps echoed downstairs. The front door opened, then closed. Silence. Then footsteps again. Heavy ones this time, coming up the stairs, step by step, slow, careful, like someone preparing for something they knew they couldn't escape. Celine wiped her face quickly. Mara turned around. The bedroom door opened, and there he was, Adrian. For a brief second, he froze. His eyes moved from Mara to Celine, then back to Mara. Something flashed across his face, shock, then guilt, then something else, something harder, something controlled. "Mara," he said slowly. "Adrian," she replied. Celine stood up immediately. "I'll go downstairs," she said quickly. "No," Mara said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Stay." Selena looked at Adrian. He gave a small nod. She stayed. Mara looked at her husband carefully, really looked at him. He looked good, healthy, well-fed. His beard was neatly trimmed. He wore a watch Mara had never seen before, an expensive one. This was not a man who had been struggling. This was not a man who had been suffering. This was a man who had been comfortable, very comfortable. "You changed the locks," Mara said. "Yes." "Why?" Adrian took a slow breath. "Because things changed." Mara tilted her head slightly. "Explain." He rubbed his forehead. "Mara, we shouldn't do this in anger." Mara almost smiled. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm listening." He looked at Selene briefly, then back at Mara. "You left." The simplicity of the statement surprised her. "I left for work," she replied calmly. "You left me alone for 3 years. I left to build this house. You abandoned the marriage." The words hung in the power, air, sharp, heavy. Mara's voice dropped. "Did I stop calling you?" Silence. "Did I stop sending money?" He didn't answer. "Did I stop caring about you?" Adrian looked away. "You changed," he said instead. Mara gave a small laugh. "I changed?" "You became distant," he continued. Every conversation was about work, hospital, overtime. "You sounded tired all the time." Mara stared at him. "I was tired." He stepped closer. "Marriage is not built on money alone." Mara nodded slowly. "You're right." She paused. "Marriage is also not built on sleeping with your wife's best friend." Selene flinched. Adrian's face hardened. "Watch your words." Mara blinked. "Watch my words?" She looked at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. "You think this is only about cheating?" Adrian said. "It's bigger than that." Mara crossed her arms. "Then make it clear." Adrian looked at Selene again, then back at Mara. "You were not planning to come back." Mara's breath caught slightly. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "Yes, I was." He shook his head. "You never told me. I wanted to surprise you when everything was ready. You were building a Life there, he said. Mara shook her head slowly. I was building a future for us. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Then Selene spoke softly. He thought you were ashamed of him. Mara turned sharply. What? Celine looked at her with tearful eyes. He said you didn't want him to come abroad because he wasn't qualified, that you were embarrassed by him. Mara looked back at Adrian. You believed that? He didn't answer, and that silence said everything. Mara exhaled slowly. You could have asked me. You could have communicated better, he replied. She nodded. So instead, you moved my best friend into my house? Adrian's voice dropped. I didn't plan to fall in love with her. The words landed hard, very hard. Celine gasped softly. Mara went completely still. Love? She repeated. Adrian nodded once. Yes. The rain outside softened slightly, but inside the room the tension grew stronger. You love her? Mara asked. Yes. And she loves you? Celine hesitated. I care about him, she whispered. Mara laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much not to. So the two of you, she said slowly, decided to build your own life inside my house using my money? Adrian's eyes darkened. It's not your house. The words dropped like a bomb. Mara blinked. What did you just say? It's not your house, he repeated. It's in my name. Silence. Deep. Uncomfortable. Mara's heart began to beat faster. No, she said slowly. We agreed it would be in both our names. You were not in the country, he replied. It was easier. Mara stared at him. You forged documents. I did what was practical. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held them together. So all the money I sent, she said quietly, was a gift, he replied. The room went silent again, but this time something had changed. This was no longer just betrayal. This was something deeper, something planned, something calculated. Mara looked at both of them. Then she took a slow step forward. Do you know what I went through to send that money? She asked. Adrian said nothing. I worked night shifts while people screamed in pain, she continued. I missed the holidays. I missed my family. I missed everything. Her voice shook slightly. And you call it a gift? Celine started crying again. Adrian looked away. But he didn't apologize. Mara stood there for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled, not because she was happy, but because something inside her had become clear. Very clear. You think I came back unprepared? She said softly. Adrian frowned. What do you mean? Mara looked at him calmly. But she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room. Down the stairs. Her footsteps were steady, controlled. Celine and Adrian followed her slowly. Mara reached her suitcase. I opened it and brought out a brown envelope. She placed it on the dining table. Adrian frowned deeper. What is that? Mara looked at him. Proof. The word hung in the air, heavy, dangerous. Adrian slowly reached for the envelope, opened it, and as his eyes moved across the papers inside, his expression changed, slowly, completely. Selene leaned closer. What is it? she whispered. Mara didn't look at them. Her voice remained calm, steady. I didn't just come back to surprise you, she said. I came back because something didn't feel right. Adrian's hands tightened around the documents. The room felt colder. The rain outside began to slow, but inside that house, something far more serious had just begun. Mara finally looked at both of them, and said quietly, There's something you don't know yet. The room felt different now. Quiet, heavy, like something serious had just entered the space and refused to leave. Mara stood calmly beside the dining table while Adrian held the documents in his hand. His fingers were tight around the papers, but his confidence was slipping. Selene stood beside him, confused, scared, unsure of what was coming next. What is this? Adrian asked slowly. Mara didn't rush. She had waited for this moment for months. I told you, she said. Proof. He flipped through the papers again. More carefully this time. Bank statements, transfer records, property documents, legal stamps. His breathing changed slightly. You think this will scare me? He said, trying to sound strong. Mara tilted her head a little. I'm not trying to scare you, she replied calmly. I'm trying to make you understand. Selene leaned closer. What does it mean? She asked. Mara looked at her briefly, then back at Adrian. Before I left Belford, she began, I made sure every transfer I sent was properly documented, not as gifts, but as financial contributions. Adrian frowned. That doesn't change anything. Mara shook her head slightly. It changes everything. She tapped one of the documents on the table. If this case is taken to court, she continued, it becomes financial fraud. International financial fraud. Selene's eyes widened. Adrian's face tightened. You're bluffing, he said quickly. Mara didn't raise her voice. Call your lawyer, she said. Silence. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. The kind of silence that forces truth to sit in the middle of the room. Adrian didn't move. For the first time since Mara arrived, he looked unsure. Not angry, not defensive, just unsure. Mara took a slow breath. Then she said something else. There's more. Both of them looked at her immediately. What? More? Adrian asked. Mara picked up her phone and unlocked it. She opened a folder. Then she placed it gently on the table and turned the screen toward them. Selene gasped softly. Adrian leaned closer. Photos, clear ones. Him and Selene together. At restaurants. At the house. Late at night. Laughing. Holding each other. Then videos, short clips, entering the compound, leaving together. Dates clearly visible. Times clearly visible. Selene covered her mouth. Adrian stepped back. Where did you get this? He asked sharply. Mara's voice stayed calm. Does it matter? It matters, he snapped. Mara looked at him carefully. You want to know who exposed you? Neither of them spoke, but their faces said yes. Mara shifted her gaze to Selene. I think you deserve to know too. Selene's lips trembled. Please, just say it. Mara inhaled slowly. It was your fiancé. The room froze. Selene blinked rapidly. My what? Your fiancé, Mara repeated. Adrian turned sharply toward her. "You were engaged?" he asked. Celine stepped back, shaking her head. I was before." Mara nodded. "His name is Kieran." Celine's face lost all colour. "He contacted me months ago," Mara continued. "At first I thought it was a scam." But he knew too much. Celine's breathing became uneven. "He said you suddenly ended the engagement," Mara said. "Blocked him." Disappeared. Celine started crying again. "I didn't know how to explain." Mara didn't interrupt. "He followed you one day," she continued. "Saw you here." Then he investigated further. That's when he found out whose house it was. Adrian ran his hand over his face. "So he's been spying on us?" he muttered. "No," Mara corrected calmly. "He was gathering evidence." Celine sank into a chair. "He said he wanted me to know the truth," Mara added. "So I wouldn't waste more years of my life." Adrian looked angry again. "That man had no right." Mara cut him off gently. "You had no right." Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not explosive, just real, heavy with truth. Celine wiped her tears slowly. "I didn't plan for this," she whispered. Mara looked at her. "When you left," Selene continued, "I was lonely too. You were my only real friend." Mara said nothing. "Adrian started calling me for small things," she said, "fixing things, helping with documents. Then he started talking more." Her voice shook. "He said you didn't care about him anymore, that you had changed." Adrian looked away. Celine looked at him, pain in her eyes. "You compared me to her," she said quietly. "You said I understood you better." Adrian didn't respond. Mara finally spoke. "You both built something on lies," she said calmly. "And now you're surprised it's falling apart." No one argued, because it was the truth. Mara picked up the documents again. "I spoke to a lawyer before I came back," she said. Adrian looked up immediately. "You what?" "I needed to understand my position." She placed the papers back down. "This house cannot be sold or transferred without my consent." Adrian's shoulders dropped slightly. The confidence was gone now. "As for the marriage," Mara continued softly, "I will file for divorce." Celine began crying again. Adrian stared at her. "You're ending it just like that?" Mara looked at him for a long moment. "Just like that?" she repeated gently. "You ended it 2 years ago." That sentence hit deeper than anything else she had said. Adrian opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Mara looked around the house, slowly. "This place," she said quietly, "I built it with love." She paused. "But I will not fight for a man who has already chosen someone else." She turned and started walking toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" Adrian asked. "To sleep," she replied. "In this house?" Mara stopped halfway and looked back at him. "Yes," she said. "This house." There was something in her voice. Not anger, not pain, authority. Adrian didn't argue. That night, Mara slept in the guest room. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't break down. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something strange. Not happiness, but not pain either. Clarity. Everything was clear now. No more guessing, no more wondering, no more hoping. Just the truth. Downstairs, she could hear low voices. Adrian and Celine arguing. The same connection that once brought them together was now breaking them apart, because relationships built in secret rarely survive the light. By morning, everything had changed. Mara stepped out onto the balcony. The rain had stopped. The air was fresh. Belford was already awake. Cars moving, people talking. Life is going on. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Adrian. "Selene left," he said quietly. Mara turned slightly. "Where?" "She packed early this morning." Mara nodded once. "And you?" she asked. Adrian looked tired. "I made mistakes." "Yes," she said. "I thought you were drifting away," he continued. "I felt insecure." Mara looked at him calmly. "And instead of fixing it, you replaced me." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Mara didn't respond immediately. Then she said gently, "That is not enough." They stood in silence. Then Adrian asked, "Is there any chance we can fix this?" Mara raised her hand slightly, stopping him. "Don't ask for what you didn't protect." His eyes filled with regret, but it was too late. Weeks passed. The divorce process began. It wasn't easy. There were arguments. Family members got involved. People talked. Rumours spread. But Mara stayed calm, focused, strong. The house was evaluated. Assets were shared. Everything was handled legally, properly, fairly. Then something unexpected happened. Mara decided to stay in Belford. She didn't go back abroad. Instead, she started something new. Using her experience, she opened a small healthcare consultancy. At first, it was slow, but gradually it began to grow. People respected her, not just for her work, but for her strength. Her story became known. Some people talked about the scandal, but over time, her success became louder than the gossip. Months later, she received one final message. From Kieran. "I hope you are healing." Mara read it. Then she locked her phone. She didn't reply. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because she didn't need saving anymore. One evening, after closing her office, she stood outside and looked at the sky. Orange, purple, beautiful. She thought about that night. The night she returned home expecting love and found betrayal. If she could speak to that version herself now, she wouldn't tell her to stay away. She wouldn't tell her to avoid the pain. She would simply say, "Walk in anyway," because sometimes the truth that breaks you is the same truth that sets you free. The house in Belford was eventually sold. Mara invested her share wisely. Adrian moved into a smaller apartment. Celine disappeared completely from her life. And Mara? She moved forward, stronger, wiser, free. Moral lessons from the Story Trust is powerful, but it must be protected. Love alone is not enough. Without honesty, trust will always break. Distance does not destroy relationships. Lack of communication does. Being far apart is not the problem. Silence and assumptions are. Sacrifice does not guarantee loyalty. You can give everything to someone, and they may still choose to betray you. Never ignore your instincts. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Your strength is revealed in how you respond to pain. Mara didn't lose herself. She rebuilt herself. You can start again, no matter how painful the ending is. Endings are not failures. Sometimes they are new beginnings. Thanks for watching.